Welcome back to the Encore Audio's YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. You know, I have found a spindle full of sandy beach. It says Sandy B on it, but it is Sandy Beach. He passed some time ago. You can look down in the description. It gives a description of how and when he passed. He was at a step study, in his daily morning step study meeting, and reading the first step, and what a way to go. Anyways, I found a bunch of workshops and individual talks, the Brentwood meeting. It's my full collection. I hope you enjoy this talk. Have a good day if you want to. I really hope you do.
Thanks. Good morning, everybody. My name's Sandy Beach, and I'm an alcoholic. How you all doing? It's a real pleasure. We've had such a good time this weekend. Carol and I have been hosted and entertained and made feel so welcome. And Vince has just been a delight to be around, and we've seen so many things. And we've heard so many good talks and workshops, and it's just a pleasure to be here. I got sober on December 7th, 1964, up in Washington, D.C. area. And I had the same sponsor for 42 years, 2 months, and 2 weeks. And that is a blessing. Everybody should be so lucky as to be with the person who came to their house. It was a lot easier getting sponsors back then. They came to your house and got you, so that you didn't have to choose one or anything like that. It was all done. It was actually a pretty good system. You didn't find out where the meetings were and go there. You called the intergroup and they sent somebody over, and then that person briefed your whole family and told you what was going to happen. And then when you got to the home group, they introduced you to everybody and said, here's a new member of our home group. And so by the time the first night was over, you knew more than some people today know in 3 months. So it was a good system. And his name was Bill Terwilliger. He was a Marine like myself, and he just meant the world to me. I moved away from the area of Virginia where he was, but we stayed in touch. And as he got sick with emphysema, I got to go up and see him a few times, and then the last time I saw him, we went to the Manassas group where I spoke, and that was where he took me to my first meeting. And there were several people there who were at that meeting, so it was quite a really big deal. And I've got a photograph of us there. And then I went to the memorial service and talked to his children, who I remember when they were little. And so this thing has a nice way. We weren't sad. We were delighted we had all this time together. And if you haven't been to a AA memorial service, not the funeral, the memorial service that AA puts on, they are really cool. I mean, you get people up there sharing, and it's so powerful, but it's a joyful event. We're celebrating the lives that we were given here in the program, and it's a delight. And I'm sure you do it here. They do it almost everywhere. Where somebody's been around a while, they'll have a memorial service. Let's see, I was born in 1931 in New Haven, Connecticut. And my parents had just come through the Depression, and things were tough, but they were somehow managing. I had one sister. She's got 32 years in AA up in Connecticut now. I never knew she drank. It just blew my mind. I went up to talk at a convention in Connecticut, and she said, could I go? And I said, sure. And we're driving along. She says, I'm a terrible alcoholic and I need help. And so we got her a sponsor that weekend, and she's been sober ever since. So it's amazing how this works. But like so many alcoholics, we sat, here's a little family of 4, we're sitting at the dinner table, and I saw the 3 of them, and then there was me. I didn't even belong in that tiny unit of 4. I don't know why, but I just had the feeling there's them, and then there's me, and I'm not part of this. And I think alcoholics are famous for not being part of anything except their own little world. And we were brought up in the Catholic Church, and my sister and I sat next to each other. She loved it. She still goes there. She thinks it's the most friendly, nice, happy, joyous place in the world. I'm sitting next to her, terrified by everything. The nuns, and they're wearing these little outfits and speaking in Latin, and incense is flying around. And I saw through the confessionals right away. I knew what was going on. They were gathering evidence for later. And so you certainly didn't want to tell them the truth. So you can see that our perception is all that matters. It really doesn't matter what's really happening. It's how we see it. And I saw something kind of frightening and overpowering. My sister saw something that gave her a lot of love and comfort. So it has nothing to do with what's really going on. It's how you somehow see it. And I think the crowning blow was, we had a big crucifix hanging from the ceiling. And I was probably about 9, and I was staring at it. Somehow I wasn't paying attention to anything. I just kept staring at it, and it was like it spoke to me. And it said, "Little boy, do you see this?" And I went, "Yeah." Well, this is what God did to his only son that he loved. Guess what he's going to do to you? I think I actually fainted, and they carried me out. And so there was a lot of trauma associated with whatever was going on there. My biggest memories of growing up was World War II. That was the major event. And it was, my uncles were all in the Army and the Air Force. And we had rationing, and we had blackout curtains so that no light could escape at night, and everything was connected to the war, and everybody was united behind it. It was an amazing country to be part of, because that was the whole effort. And I remember my mother, every 6 months or so, she'd go through her pantry, and she'd look for another pot that she didn't need and take it over the center of town and throw it in a chicken wire enclosure where they would melt the pots down for bullets. And then 6 months later, she'd look and go, "Well, maybe I don't need this one." And boy, she was down to very few pots and pans by the end of the war. But it was it left a big impression on me in terms of being part of something and having the sense of there was something bigger than me, more important than me, that everybody agreed on. And the next time I saw that was in the Marine Corps, and the next time I saw that was AA. It was those are the 3 singular events. And I had polio as a kid, and I lost the use of my right arm and leg, and I was lucky that the Sister Kenny treatment worked on a very small percentage of the people who had polio, and I was one of them where I got most of the use back. And I was a good student, a pretty good little athlete, and my father sent me to a little prep school in New Haven, and it fed right into Yale. It was connected almost. If you went there, you could go to Yale. And that's where my father worked, and I worked construction. I worked on all the buildings down there. I knew the whole campus extremely well. But when I went there as a student, it was entirely different, because all these people were like rich, and they were smart, and I didn't belong there. I was in my dungaree work clothes because I was going to work on some buildings later on. And I realized there's been a big mistake made that I was down here. And I had the feeling sometime during the freshman year they were going to call us all out on the old campus. There would be about 1,000 of us, and the dean was going to go, "Gentlemen, we have found an imposter in our midst, and he's right over there, and get him out of here." So that was the feeling I had. So it was I was very uncomfortable being there. And my roommates are going, "Well, you ought to drink. It makes you feel good." "No, I'm going to continue getting good grades and athletics and all of that." And I've been there about 2 months, and my name was on a list to go meet some other guys. There were 20 names. Just go in and talk to each other. Just say hi, who are you, where are you from? That is impossible for me to do. Because what happens is I walk in, I'm ready to meet these people, but as I turn to go there, they look at me, and with their eyes they say, "We don't want to know you. Please don't come over to our group." And that's a very powerful signal. It just stops you right in your tracks. And I remember going over, tried to go to 3 different groups, and just boom. So I was going to leave, but there was a bar there, and I said, well, maybe my roommates are right. Maybe I ought to try something, see how it makes you feel. And so I had 2.5 drinks. I'm talking with the bartender. I'm waiting. I don't feel anything. And I said, well, maybe I'll just leave. And I turned around to go, and I've said this in every talk I've ever given. I looked back out, and everyone in the room wanted to know me. They were all, their eyes were looking at me, just begging me to come over and be one of their closest friends. It was just like, "God, we just think you're the great." I could hardly stand all of that. So I picked a group and I started over, and on the way over I agreed with them that they would be lucky to know me. And all of the anxiety was gone for the first time in my life. It was like, this is the first time I was ever me. Completely free to be myself and come up with funny jokes, and I knew something to say about everything. And I talked and talked till everybody left. Does that sound familiar? "Hey, where are you all going? Hey. So alcohol really changed the world that I lived in. And now I said, this is what they're talking about. Because I used to hear people say, "Isn't it a great world? Isn't it?" And I'd go, "I don't know, I don't see it." So I said, well, if 3 drinks did that, I wonder what 20 might do. Got to get that out of the way the first night. And so I went back and poured as much alcohol in as I could and got violently ill. And the big thing out of that was that I was sick all night, and I'm sat on the edge of the bed in the morning, just, God, I was hurting. Just, God, it was terrible. And the thought occurred to me, "Are you going to drink again tonight?" And it was a millisecond. I went, "Yes." I said, this almost dying and puking and head coming splitting apart is a small price to pay for what I had last night. Because what I had last night was the secret of life. If I could live in that world, the future looks pretty good. Now that's how an alcoholic feels. A social drinker just doesn't have that. And if they threw up all night, they certainly wouldn't be looking forward to drinking again. But I was in the category where alcohol did something for me that was so powerful, I was prepared to pay a big price for it. And as everybody's story just tells how big a price we paid. And everybody's story is different. But you pay one heck of a price to be an alcoholic. The fortunate ones hit some kind of a bottom, and by some coincidence, miracle, they hear about AA, they come in here, and their lives are changed. But that's only 10% of the alcoholics ever get a shot at AA. So we are really among the fortunate alcoholics, and that's why our responsibility to pass this on is so huge. If we could just save one other alcoholic, that there's a life's work done right there. Anyway, I had no idea. I thought I was just the same as all the other guys, getting drunk and partying and all that. But the grades disappeared. There was no more athletics. Drinking was the main event. I started getting in fights, going to jail. But, just silly things. I remember that was the first year the "Don't Walk" signs came out. Yesterday, you could walk anywhere you want. Today, some bureaucrat puts this thing on a post on the other side and says, "Don't walk." Well, you know how we reacted to that. "Don't walk, watch this." And of course, the cops are there, and they're trying to enforce this, and we think it's silly, and we're giving them a hard time. And I'm going to walk back, I'm going to walk over, I'm going to walk, and just. Then if it said walk, we'd go, "We're not walking, we're going to stay right here." So we got arrested a few times on that. Just. Anyway, to make a long story short, I barely graduated. I looked at my record about 25 or 30 years ago and went, "Holy cow, that is bad." But I did graduate, and the Korean War was going on. The draft was still on. And a bunch of guys were drinking beer, and they said, "We're going down to join the Marine Corps. Why don't you go with us?" And I said, "Yeah, let me finish my beer. That sounds like a lot of fun." And I'm sure that recruiter saw us coming in and went, "Oh, good, we got these guys." And so I signed up, and a few months later, I'm on a train going south, and it was, anybody who's joined the Marine Corps, you know what a rude awakening it is. I can still remember finally getting to bed after the first night, and I went, "Man, these guys, they ought to relax a little and lighten up. They're way too intense. Woo!" But the strangest thing was, as time went on, I started loving it. I loved the discipline. I loved being part of something. And we finished that boot camp part of it, and then I was off for 6 months for training to be an infantry platoon leader. And I just thought it was wonderful. And at the end of the 6 months, near the end, there was a training movie about pilots. And I had never been in a plane. I didn't know anything about flying. But these guys looked so cool. They were at the bar. I think they had scarves on. And they're talking with their hands. And there's a couple of blondes in the background. And I went, "Wow, what the hell is that?" And I went up to the major and I said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, you don't want to sign up for that. You have to stay in 3 more years." I said, "No, I'll sign up." So I signed up. I got accepted. I had met a lovely lady in Branford, Connecticut. We got married, and we're off to flight school in Pensacola, Florida. It's the happy day, the honeymoon, the whole thing. Anyway, I got airsick on the on the commercial flight going down. And I got airsick for about the first 6 flights in the old SNJ, and things were looking bad, but the motion sickness went away, and all of a sudden I was doing very well. I'd be number 2 or 3, and as we went through each phase, and I just thought it was great. And when the chance to get a regular commission came along, I signed up. I'm going to make this a career. I'm going to stay in for 30 years. And I made it through flight school. It takes about 18 months. You get your wings. I got orders for training in El Toro, California, and then going overseas into a fighter squadron, and the war ends. So we're over there flying these high-performance planes, very exciting. And if you weren't flying planes, you were playing ping pong. Hand-eye coordination is why they had them in the ready rooms everywhere. People come out, "You guys are just goofing off." No, this is hand-eye coordination so that you will. They don't do that now, I'm sure, but we did a lot of things back then. Back then, they could not, the radar wasn't good enough to identify planes. So if you flew under a bridge, if no one saw you, you didn't do it. You know what I'm saying? So there was we had a lot more fun in those days than they do now. As a matter of fact, I remember in Japan, the other squadron started it, but we picked up on it, and that was during the day flying around, you'd find a wide open flat area with a railroad track on it. And you'd go down and reconnoiter it, make sure there's no telephone poles or high tension wires or anything like that. And then we'd come back at night, and before we went out, we had the maintenance guy take a landing light out of one of the landing gears so that when you dropped your gear, one light shone straight ahead. And you dropped the flaps and got real slow, and you saw a train up there, you got on the track and flew right at him. And then you'd pull up at the last minute, and we just imagined that he pulled the emergency thing. And then he told him that the train that was coming at him went over him at the last second. So we have no idea what happened, but it was a different era in terms of being able to kind of goof around and that kind of stuff. But anyway, during that year, I did well. The squadron drank a lot. We were a very close unit. And I thought I was accepted, was just, one of the guys, and that they all thought highly of me. And one of my heroes was a major who was a maintenance officer, big Irish guy. And we were out in the end of the runway practicing, watching our guys practice for going on the carrier. And we're just talking and critiquing, oh, he's high, he's low, oh, power, add power, blah, blah, blah. And he turns to me and he says, Sandy, in about 18 months I'll be a lieutenant colonel. I'm going to get my own squadron. It's going to be a fighter squadron. I'm going to get the best pilots in the Marine Corps. It's going to be one heck of a squadron. And I want you in that squadron. I'm a lieutenant. And I'm just going, oh my God, I never felt better in my life. And then he said, but I wouldn't let you drink. And I pretended I didn't hear him. It was like, this is a guy I get drunk with fairly regularly, and he said, I wouldn't let you drink. And I didn't know till I got to AA that us alcoholics, our drinking scares heavy drinkers. If you know what I mean. We're overseas, we're just drinking a lot. I don't know what he's doing. He's doing a lot more than just drinking a lot. And so there was some intensity, there was something about my relationship with alcohol that scared him. And he told me about it, but I didn't listen. It wasn't important. But it frightened me a little bit. So anyway, we started having children. We ended up with 6 children. I got transferred all over the place. I had a nice tour with an infantry regiment, and I was the forward air controller in one of the battalions out at Camp Pendleton. And I was a flight instructor for 3 years, and then I went into aerial photography. I got into a photo squadron during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And on the outside, it would look good. Here's this guy, he's got promoted to captain now, he's got 13 years in the Marine Corps, and everything looks wonderful. But on the inside, I was coming apart, and I was starting to have withdrawal symptoms while I'm flying. The alcohol is wearing off, and I'm starting to freak out because I'm starting to shake, I'm starting to lose my peripheral vision, and I'm starting to sweat, and my heart's starting to race. And it's just me in the plane. And so I'm going, boy, this is getting hard. And I remember I'd be climbing up going, damn, part of me doesn't want to do this because it was getting scary. Anyway, I kept it up for about 7 months of that. And it kept getting worse. A couple times I thought I was going to pass out. So I flew with one hand on the ejection seat. And I had this theory that if I passed out, I'd pull the seat, I'd be out, the chute would open automatically, the plane would crash, problem solved. Do you follow what I'm saying? And I remember just going, man, you know how to think your way out of it. This is really cool, you're flying along. And of course, that was not in the pilot's handbook. How to fly the Crusader during alcoholic withdrawals. There wasn't And I'm sure everybody with the job you were in, that you were doing things that wasn't covered by any instructions. You had to figure it out yourself. And it finally got so bad. In this photo squadron, we had two types of airplanes. And I was on a cross country in this other one. It was an easy plane to fly. It was a radar plane. It had a radar guy sitting over to the right. And I didn't really know where we were coming from. I knew we were going back to Cherry Point, but my memory wouldn't remember. Where were we? And I decided that I had to get out of that plane now.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
Now, I've had things where I had to get out of whatever it was now on the ground. I was getting a haircut one time, and I said, "You got to get out of here now." And I was out. He said, "I'm not through cutting your hair." "Yes, you are. I'm out." So I don't know if you had times where you had to leave. You can't stay where you are. It was like I couldn't stay in my own skin. And I said, "Oh, I got to get out of this thing." It didn't have an ejection seat. It had a chute on the bottom. You had to pull a door up. And I remember going, "Damn, I'm not sure I know how that works." And then I looked over and I said, "This guy doesn't know how to fly. If I jump out of here, he's going to be going, 'Oh my God, where did the pilot go?'" So I called the flight leader and told him we were having an oxygen problem. And whenever you have an oxygen problem, you have to land immediately because it might be something in there that could cause you to pass out or whatever. So he saw an Air Force field over there. We got down, we landed, I went over, had a couple drinks. Now I feel better, and I'm trying to act like I'm okay. Next morning, the maintenance people said there's nothing wrong with the oxygen. And so the flight leader's going, "Well, Sandy, what's going on?" And I turned to him and I said, "I can't fly anymore. I can't fly anymore." Now, this was what I love more than anything. This is the reason for my whole career. And I just said, "I can't fly anymore. I'm giving up." And somebody else flew us back. It's kind of confusing to me. And I went back to that squadron, and now that I wasn't going to fly, they had to give me a new specialty, and it took about 3 months, and I became an air traffic controller. That was what the Marine Corps thought would be a good assignment for a guy in my shape. Now, we had something interesting happen a couple years ago. I was out in California in the Brentwood group in Los Angeles, a big group of about 500 people, and the format is they get an old-timer to come. He talks about a topic for a half an hour, and then they ask questions. They stand up and ask. They had Chuck Chamberlain would be there for like 2 months at a time. I'd love to. Oh, great, thanks. I wish I could have been there. I got to meet him, by the way, and what an amazing man. So anyway, I was getting ready to lead this meeting, and a lady was getting her 30-year medallion. Her husband wasn't in AA, but he drove her to meetings a lot, and he went to conventions with her, and he knew a lot of the AA people who've been doing it quite a few years, and she's telling him, "Oh, it's Sandy Beach is leading this meeting." He said, "Was he a Marine pilot?" And she said, "I think so." He says, "I know him. Tell him to come on out. I want to talk to him." So I go out, and here's a guy I've never seen before. And he looks at me and says, "In 1962, you were flying an F-3D in the flight of 4 on a cross country, and you declared an oxygen emergency in all the planes. And all the planes had to land, and you never flew again." And I went, "God, how do you know that?" He said, "I was in the plane with you." And I went, "You were?" Oh my God, and I was glad because now he's going to find out what was really happening and all this. And it turns out he was a pilot. He wasn't a radar guy. We had flown away from Cherry Point because a hurricane was coming. They called it a hurricane evacuation. You take all the planes and you go somewhere safe and you drink until the hurricane leaves, and then you fly back. So you can see we do the dangerous stuff. And so when that happens, just pilots go. So there was a pilot in both seats. And the reason I didn't know him that well was he had been recalled from American Airlines because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so he came into the squadron, and I guess I didn't remember meeting him. And so it was just wonderful. He was talking to me about how it felt to him, and then this was happening. He came back the next day to a convention up in Oxnard, and he brought all the photographs from the squadron. And I remember him now, and I remember him, and I remember him. And something amazing happened. Because the 3 months I had in that squadron, after I said I wasn't going to fly anymore, I felt like a piece of junk. And I had a little office where I did the legal work while we waited till I got my orders. And I could see the pilots walking by, looking in, going, God damn, that guy, I just could feel shame. I had 3 months of shame, is what it was. I don't remember being comfortable talking to anybody. I just wanted to get out of there. Here's this guy, 42 years later, and he says to me, did you know how popular you were in that squadron? Everybody loved you. Oh my God, it broke the colonel's heart. He was doing everything he could to help you. And we were so sad. God, it broke our hearts when you left. Now that's not my version of what happened at all. So I went back 42 years and went erase, 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 and put in, they loved me and were very sad that I was leaving. So it is possible to change your past. It's very possible. You substitute what you thought happened with what really happened. And that's why getting rid of old ideas is so powerful. And those old ideas, most of them are probably not accurate at all, because they came from a very self-centered, frightened perspective. And we're very lucky any time that we can find out what really happened. Find out that our parents were a lot better than we thought they were. Find out that some other relative is a rather likable person. My parents, at their 50th wedding anniversary, my sister was planning it up in Connecticut, and she had about 15 years of sobriety at the time. And she was going over the list of people that were coming, and I was going, oh, good, yeah. And then she got to Uncle John, and I went, oh, no, Sue, do we have to invite him? God, he's so obnoxious and abrasive. He ruins the harmony of the whole event. Are you sure we have to invite him? And she said, he only does that when you're around. He's a great guy. Everybody loves him. I said, what? And if she wasn't in the program, I don't know if I would have believed it. But I said, all right, I'm going to take her at his word. And I saw him, and I ran over, and I went, Uncle John, how are you? And I gave him a big hug. He was a little shocked. And then it turned out he was a great guy. And something about me must have really ticked him off from time to time, but that cleared that up. So it was just this Cherry Point thing was a huge event that just happened a couple years ago for me to see how incorrectly we've seen our own lives and how we suffer from it because of what we told ourselves happened. Because we always put the worst adjective on it. What did I put on there? 3 months of shame. That was my official title of those 3 months. Yeah, I sat there in 3 months of shame. And I did, but I put myself through it. They were so sad I was leaving. If I had listened to them or been able to see what was going on, I would have been comforted instead of feeling this shame. So anyway, I think there's just a big program lesson in that story, and I enjoyed telling it. In any event, I did become an air traffic controller, didn't kill anybody. That's what I did in my last year of drinking. I was overseas, just trying to survive. I lost 50 pounds due to malnutrition. I just ate soup, drank a lot of vodka, and tried to stay there. It was very, very difficult. I got orders back to Quantico to go through a career school to get promoted to major, lieutenant colonel. And in the school, I was starting to hallucinate, and I was starting to really freak out. I would come to the school, and I couldn't remember what classroom I was in, where my seat was. I mean, it was really... I came in one day through the gate, saluted the sentries. It was called junior school. It was 3 brick buildings. And I went up on the hill, and the buildings were gone. They were gone. I sat there looking, going, God. So I went back to the front gate to report it. And this Lance Corporal who saluted me when I came in, he saw me come out and swing around. He went, "Yes, sir?" And I said, "Junior school is gone." And he said, "What?" I said, "I just drove up there. I'm going to class up there. There's no junior school." Huh. So he got his car with the red light. We drove up. They were back. So I'd like to hear his version when he went back to the... Because I just looked at him, I said, "They're back." So anyway, about a week later, I had a grand mal seizure. And boy, I almost bit that tongue right in half. And I was sent up to Bethesda Naval Hospital for observation to see what caused the seizure. And there was no alcohol program. There was no diagnosis of alcoholism. You could be crazy, but there was no such thing as being an alcoholic. So when I got into the place, they were studying me and bad food, bad diet, wonder what it is, blah, blah, blah. And it took about 6 days of not drinking and being on the edge of seizures to go into the delirium tremens. And those DTs came on, and they were very frightening. It was connected with reality, but the rest was in my mind, all this crazy stuff that was happening, and I guess I freaked out. And so they captured me and put me in a straitjacket, and then I was locked up in the nut ward for 6 months. So that was really where my bottom was when I came to in that nut ward, and it was, oh God, the deep withdrawals and all that. They didn't have good drugs, and it was just, ah. And then, after a while, the nut ward is kind of a comforting place because nobody can get in and bother you. Your entire day is clay class, therapy, things like that. And as the time went on, there were 3 alcoholics and the rest were mental problems. And the mental people felt that we didn't belong there. That we were kind of given a bad name to the nut ward because they had legitimate mental illnesses, and we were just drunks, and all we needed to do was to stop drinking. And they would come up in group therapy. "You guys just need to stop drinking." And I remember going, man, does he think my problem is that simple, that it could be solved by not drinking? No wonder he's locked up in here. It was just, So, probably about the 4th month, an AA group in Bethesda talked the head psychiatrist into allowing them to bring an AA meeting, even though technically there were no alcoholics there. because there was no such thing as an alcoholic. And I guess the psychiatrist saw the wisdom in it, in spite of what the Navy's policy was. And so the three of us one night, Corpsman came in. All right, you three drunks, fall in, right face, over to the elevator. I'm at a meeting. And the guys told their stories, and I really felt, wow, these guys are cool. This is a great organization. I said, I'm going to get that guy's phone number. I said, man, if I run into a guy who needs this, I'm going to send him around to see you. You know, it was like I already had dismissed myself from that. And that's when I got the AA finger in the chest, and we had guys that did that. And he said, hey, man, let me ask you something. You're just poking. Which one of us is going to go out the door and put their overcoat on and go on home and see their family? And which one of us is going to put his little blue bathrobe on and go upstairs and get locked up like an animal? And I remember just going, damn, I just met this guy. This is a very rude treatment. But we went there on a weekly basis, and finally, and I was sort of attracted to it, but then prior to release, we were allowed to go home at night and on weekends, where you're kind of an outpatient awaiting orders. And I lasted about 2 weeks, and then I decided that, damn, I have a rule that you can't watch a Redskin game unless you're having a beer. So that meant I had to sit home with the TV off or have a beer. And that was the strangest thing, because I drank the beer and nothing happened. It was one of those occasions where that's enough. I feel good. I went to bed, slept like a baby, got up the next day to drive back to the nut ward. I'm driving up. It's about a 40-minute drive, and I'm thinking, man, you had a drink and nothing happened. You're free from this stuff. I was so excited I couldn't eat lunch. I could not eat lunch. And then when I got home that night, I couldn't sleep. I was celebrating being free from alcohol. And the next day, all I could think about was I had a drink and nothing happened. And I did that for 5 days. Couldn't sleep and thought about nothing except I had a drink and nothing happened. If you'd like a good definition of alcoholic obsession, there it is. All I thought about was I had a drink and nothing happened. So the next weekend, and I swear I went in, and I bought a bottle of vodka, and I honestly believed I was buying a year's supply. That's what I felt. I'm free now. I'll have one once in a while. This will be nice. And the bottle was gone before the weekend was over, and now I was smuggling alcohol back into the nut ward. And I knew they were going to catch me. And on that weekend, Pearl Harbor Day, I called the intergroup. And I said, I need help. And they sent my sponsor over. And he came into my house, and I wasn't buying what he was talking about. And my family was lying about me and telling him how terrible I was. And I said, no, let me think about it, leave some literature and everything. And he said, get in the car. And you see T-shirts around. I've seen them, get in the car. And I thought that was step one of AA. Get in the car. And I'm at my first meeting, and I've got about maybe 3.5, 4 hours of sobriety. And it was a group anniversary in Manassas, and out in the country there, man, they had the meals, the anniversaries, and then they had square dancing with fiddles. And people are dancing all around. So by the time the meeting was over, I probably had 9 hours of sobriety, because it lasted at least 4 hours, maybe 4.5. And something wonderful happened that night. I was standing out on the porch. It was on some road with no street lights, and it was starting to maybe sleet or freezing rain. I'm looking around. I'm going to make a break for it. But I don't know where to run. There's no place to go. But I don't want to stay with these people. I don't want to stop drinking. I'm just in terrible, just horrible withdrawals. And a lady put her hand on my shoulder. It was an Al-Anon lady named Betsy Lynch. And I turned around, and she said, come on back in. Everything's going to be fine. And I believed her. It was like an angel came out, said, everything's going to be fine. And I went, Oh, good. And I went back in. So I have a great debt of gratitude to Al-Anon for that act of love. And I haven't had a drink since. And I've had an amazing life. I lost my career in the Marine Corps. Didn't get promoted to major. And 3 months after we were dumped out, now I got there's 8 of us, and I'm not getting a job, and things are looking bad, and I'm not grateful anymore, and I don't like AA, and I don't like meetings. You know how all this stuff goes. And I'd go to meetings, and they go, anybody got a topic? Yes. Getting thrown out of the Marine Corps. And they'd go, Sandy, that's not a universal topic. I want to talk about getting thrown out of the Marine Corps. All right. So they'd start around the room, and this guy says, thrown out of the Marine Corps, say the serenity prayer. And I go, yeah, that's going to do a lot. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. And next person, double up on your meetings. Double up on your meetings. All right, yeah. Go help a new guy. Take your mind off yourself. Oh, yeah, thank you. Say the prayer of St. Francis. He took a vow of poverty. And I said, yeah, I understand that. And I honestly went home that night going, I didn't explain myself very well. Because the answers I was getting, I thought someone at least was going to stand up and go, what's that? You've been thrown, you're available? Listen, I have a corporation back here. I'm looking for a senior vice president. I could give you about $50,000 a year with a car. Would that be all right? That would be some good help. I'm getting this junk, and I remember going back years later, I was going through a divorce. I raised my hand, the same thing. Oh, going through a divorce. Have you tried the serenity prayer? Double up on the meeting. Try to help somebody new. Say the prayer of St. Francis. He took a vow of celibacy. Okay. You know how it goes, and then bankruptcy's coming along. I was so poor the first 15 years in AA, it was just awful. So I'm talking about, I'm going to have to file bankruptcy. Well, I don't know what to do. You know what happened. Serenity prayer. Double up in your meeting. Find the eating meetings where they have sandwiches. Go eat over there. Try to help somebody new. Take your mind off it. Blah, blah, blah. Say this prayer of St. Francis. He took a vow of poverty. So, why am I telling that story? Because it doesn't matter what the problem is. There's only one solution. And our friend Clancy talks about it. I haven't heard him talk about it recently, but he used to talk about his aha machine. When people he sponsored would call up and he'd get them on the phone. Oh, what's going on now, Ralph? Oh, yeah, good. And then he'd put the phone down. He'd walk around the room. Every few minutes he'd come by the phone and go, uh-huh. And then he'd go around. And then he'd pick it up. Okay, Ralph, listen, here's what you do. And then he'd tell him how to stay sober and go to meetings and do all this. So in other words, we only have one solution here. And it's not tailored to any problem. And the solution is God. Because in the final analysis, no matter how we diagnose our problems, the only problem you can ever have is being separated from God. And that's what causes us to think we have problems. And if we're connected, we see everything differently, and we realize that things are going to be fine. That this is going to turn out, this is all going to turn out fine. So for me, the greatest thing that's happened in my sobriety is that lesson. It is the ultimate lesson of our steps. And I mentioned earlier that I did have the chance to meet Chuck Chamberlain, who's, if you haven't listened to his talks or seen New Pair of Glasses, he's quite a teacher. And I got to go to his house and sit in his chair, and this was in the 70s. I went out there about 4 different times. And I would sit and listen. The conversation with Chuck was pretty one-sided. He talked, and then you could take it all in. And I would sit there, and what he said was so inspiring and so wonderful. I would just sit and go, wow. But I had no idea what he was talking about. I just knew it was great. And it's the same thing if I'm saying to someone new today, the only problem you have is being separated from God. It's not going to register too well. They'll remember that, boy, that sounds great, but I still need money, so all right. It takes a while for this to sink in.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom?
And I remember saying to him, he said, God will just take care of everything. And I said, what about the saying, God helps those that help themselves? He said, no, that's wrong. God helps those that ask. And I went, oh. And I said, well, what about, I do the leg work and God does the impossible. No, God will help you with the leg work. In other words, everything was God. And I remember him saying in several of his talks, for the last 21 years, I get up every day and get guided by God. So that was his entire program. And I went, isn't that great? And then I created a different program. I said, well, that's good for Chuck, but I think what I need to do, and then I would come up with things that I did on my own. There's part of us that wants to do things on our own, unaided. And I'll give you an example of that. My sponsor was trying to teach me a lesson early on. When I was new, I would freak out going to hospitals because it reminded me of death. So I couldn't visit anybody in the hospital. I'd just see somebody in a gown or smell the smell of a hospital, and I'd start feeling dizzy, and I actually couldn't visit people because I just came out of the nut ward, and it was really freaky. And so I said, I want to go see Bill in our group. And my sponsor said, well, what if I go with you? And I said, yeah. That might make it different. And the fact he was with me made it comfortable. I was able to feel safe with him there. And we went, and it was a good visit. And then I said, I'd like to go back and visit again. He says, I'll go with you. So we went back. And I think about the third time I said, I guess someday I'll be able to do this on my own. He said, no, I'll always go with you. He was trying to tell me, never do anything on your own. Always be connected to help. So what he meant was the next time you go, take God with you. Always be connected to help. That is my underlying message to myself and to everyone else. Always be connected to help. You will never have that feeling of being alone again. You'll never have the feeling of being overpowered. Why does life seem overpowering? Because it's just you against everything out there. Then you're holding God's hand. It's like when the kids are beating you up in grammar school and your great big brother walks you to school. You're looking at everybody going, now screw with me. You know what I mean? And that's the feeling we can have if we're walking hand in hand with God, is what could bother us? What could be too much for us? And I think that's one of the hardest lessons we have in AA, is to get rid of self-sufficiency. Because our whole society has taught us that you aren't anyone unless you accomplish something on your own. And that is worth nothing in the spiritual world. That is the exact opposite of what we all should be doing, which is to be becoming more dependent as each year goes by. It seems like with a lot of sobriety, you ought to be better off than when you came in. But if we're really working the program, we're going to have turned over even more to a higher power. And I want to wrap up by saying something to the new person, because I'm running out of energy, and I think we've reached the magic hour. You really have to trust the process here, because it's impossible for you to understand it. I remember when my sponsor said, Sandy, the steps contain everything. This is our entire program, are those 12 steps. You've got to understand that. That's where you want to put your trust. So I said, well, I'm going to go home and study them. See if he's right. I'm going to understand what he's talking about. And I remember at the end of studying it for a week, I came back and I said, I don't know, Bill, which one is the money step? I just can't see it. And this is what you have to know about spirituality. You can't understand it until you do it. And then it becomes revealed. And you experience the results of the steps. And even you can't explain why it works to the next person. Did you ever try and explain AA to your family members? Why are you so happy? Well, oh God, I go to AA. What do you do? Oh God, it's great. You ought to come with me sometime. We have the little group, we sit around the table, and then somebody will come up with a topic, like resentment, and then we'll all go around. Everybody gets to say something about it. Then we say the Lord's Prayer, and we go home. Want to come? And they go, they couldn't get it. Bring them to an open speaker meeting or something, and they get it that night. They get it. The energy grabs them, and they just go, I get it. And that's the only way to get it. There's no way to understand it. You have to experience it. And what you're going to get as you experience this, you're going to come to see yourself in an entirely different way. You have no idea what a magnificent person you are. You have no idea what's going to be revealed to you about yourself. You are put here for a purpose. You are going to be a very useful part of AA. You can't see it yet, but it will appear. And I wish I was going to be around to see it happen to every newcomer. One of the privileges in AA is to watch the light come back in the eyes, watch the smile come back on the face, watch people's confidence return, and watch them love to be in service to others. Thank you all very much. Oh, boy.
Take care and have a good day if you want to. I know I will. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst and one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.